Welcome to this latest EU Today podcast. We have a very interesting little session for you today, actually, because we're going to be discussing a major political scandal which has unfolded against the background of the Russian conflict, the Russian war against Ukraine. We have with us today Bohdan Vitvitsky, who is an American-Ukrainian lawyer. Well, actually, a little bit more than a lawyer. He's a former US federal prosecutor. He's known for his work on anti-corruption. He's also been a special advisor to the Prosecutor General of Ukraine on reform issues. Bogdan, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I want to ask you for your thoughts on this spat between Ukraine and Poland. This took us all by surprise. We didn't really know too much about the issues, and when the headlines broke over here, we were kind of like Googling a little bit. But basically, the President of Poland, Karol Nawrocki, has revoked an award, a prestigious award, the Order of White Eagle from President Vladimir Zelensky. And this has been done because, as I understand it, President Zelensky had named a new military unit after a controversial Ukrainian unit from the Second World War. Have I got that all correct?
Mostly, what had happened with the unit was that the unit itself, as have many other units of the Ukrainian armed forces over the last 4.5 years, the unit itself voted to adopt a name so that it wouldn't just be identified as a unit, whatever 45 or whatever its particular identifying number may have been, and they wanted to name them. They wanted to name themselves or adopt the name the heroes of the UPA, the Ukrainian insurgent or partisan army during World War II. As President Zelensky has done in 10 or 20 other instances in which other units of the army have asked to adopt various names, it turns out that this has to be done by presidential decree. A unit can't simply vote itself a name. And so President Zelensky, again, as he had done on numerous other occasions, held a brief ceremony with the unit and issued a proclamation that from now on, this particular unit shall be known as the unit acknowledging the heroes of the Ukrainian partisan or Ukrainian insurgent army. The controversy astounded most Ukrainians in the sense that nobody thinks that President Zelensky or the unit that had voted to adopt the name had intended to do anything to offend the sensibilities of the Poles. So in Ukraine, the reaction is one of bewilderment, some anger as well that I can explain, but that's basically how the controversy arose. The controversy, from my point of view, is sheer folly. It's sheer folly because whether in terms of geopolitical interests, whether in terms of the history of Polish-Ukrainian reconciliations since 1991, when Ukraine became independent, or with respect to how Ukrainians have tried to be sensitive to Polish sensibilities. The controversy is folly. To start with geopolitical interests, in terms of long-term interests, Polish and Ukrainian interests align 100%, in the sense that neither Poland nor Ukraine has any designs upon the other. Both of them are either a member already or want to align with the EU and NATO. And with respect to their principal enemy, it's also the same, i.e. Russia. With respect to short-term interests, as the Ukrainian parliamentarian Mykola Kняжицький said in Gdansk just a couple of days ago, in the short term, Poland and Ukraine need each other because Poland is economically developed and has capital, and Ukraine has great technology, drones, and battlefield experience like no one else. So, again, with respect to interests, either long term or short term, they align 100%. Now, with respect to the post 1991 history of reconciliation, uh, with one exception, all Ukrainian presidents have participated in a mutual reconciliation declaration with Polish presidents. Uh, for example, in 1997, President Kuchma and Polish President Kwasniewski jointly declared, "We forgive and we ask for forgiveness." They then repeated that in 2003 in a different location, because this has typically been done on the site of a location where Poles were killed and then on the site at which Ukrainians were killed. Then in 2006, President Yushchenko and Polish President Kaczynski again jointly declared, "We forgive and ask for forgiveness." It was repeated in 2009. And then in 2016, Ukrainian President Poroshenko and Polish President Duda jointly declared, "We forgive and ask for forgiveness." And then in 2023, current President Zelensky and Polish President Duda participated in a joint prayer of reconciliation to honor the victims of the Volyn massacre. So in terms of the recent, by recent I mean since 1991, not centuries going back, in terms of the recent efforts at historical reconciliation, uh, there is a rich history of both Ukrainian and Polish presidents having done that. So that is the second reason why the current controversy is mystifying. Uh, with respect to World War II and Volyn, there is no question that during the Second World War in 1943, the Ukrainian insurgent army, UPA, engaged in what we would today consider war crimes. That is to say, they attacked villages, Polish villages in Volyn. Volyn had a majority Ukrainian population, a minority Polish population. The reasons for the attack were that the Polish government in exile in London continued to insist that what is today Western Ukraine should belong to Poland. Uh, so the Polish minority was insisting that it should continue to dominate the majority Ukrainian population. As you might expect, the Ukrainian population was less than pleased with that projected state of affairs. Again,
Okay.
that doesn't justify attacking, men, women, and children and burning villages, etc. But I'm trying to provide some context. Anyway, there's no question that that happened. There's also no question that tens of thousands of Poles were killed. Nobody in Ukraine denies that or obscures that or whatever. The problem for Poland, from my perspective, is that Polish units did some of the same kinds of things to Ukrainian villages on a smaller scale, but they did them nonetheless. So, coming out of the law, I'm familiar with an important principle that's referred to as the clean hands principle. And in a nutshell, the clean hands principle provides or expects or demands that, for example, if I accuse you of some wrongdoing, I, I cannot have committed the same wrongdoing because otherwise my accusation or allegation is negated. This is a principle in Anglo-American law, but it's also a principle that has analogs in European law in so-called civil law. Uh, Given the fact that the Polish Home Army, which was the underground army of the Polish government in exile in London during World War II, given that the Polish Home Army, the AK, participated in similar kinds of, or engaged in similar kinds of activities with respect to a number of Ukrainian villages in terms of killing men, women, and children, in terms of burning the village down. Um, I don't understand how now uh, Poland wants to make an issue of the fact that, yes, the Ukrainian underground partisan army, the UPA, engaged in these kinds of activities, which, again, I think today there's no question we would characterize them as war crimes. But the Polish Home Army AK also participated in war crimes. Uh, Ukraine, I mean, should Ukraine get a voice as to whether Poland has a right to have monuments to AK? I think Poles would think we're crazy to suggest that. And yet, Poles think that they can somehow impose their judgment upon Ukrainians. Uh, the reason some or many, it's hard to tell because the public opinion polls show different percentages. The reason that the Ukrainian insurgent army or the Ukrainian partisan army, UPA, is held in ever increasingly higher esteem is that without having really any help from anybody, members of the UPA managed to fight at one point the Germans, the Poles, and the Soviets. And they were fighting for Ukrainian independence. And they were fighting for the idea of an independent Ukrainian state. And they did so with extraordinary sacrifice, with extraordinary number of casualties. Uh, and they did so all throughout the 1940s into the early 1950s, even though the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union obviously took over Western Ukraine in 1944-45 as they were pushing the Germans towards Berlin. The Ukrainian insurgent army nonetheless managed to fight the Soviets tooth and nail, managed to try to fight the imposition of Soviet rule in Western Ukraine tooth and nail. And kind of ironically, even though there were instances of the Polish Home Army AK engaging in war crimes against Ukrainian villages, this was in 1944, 1945. Uh, by 1945, a couple of months after one of the attacks on a Ukrainian village, the Ukrainians and the Poles reached an agreement to stop attacking each other and to help each other. And a year later, in 1946, they actually planned and carried out a joint attack against a communist security force. Uh, so the history is complicated. The controversy is folly. As I said, in relation to both Poland's and Ukraine's current geopolitical interests and long-term geopolitical interests. And I think just as Ukrainians don't have a right to tell Poles or anyone else whom they should celebrate for what, I think analogously Poles don't have a right to tell Ukrainians. They would if, for example, Ukrainians were to deny that the killings of Poles had taken place. I mean, they would definitely have a legitimate basis to complain then. But nobody in Ukraine denies that the killings took place. Or if someone were crazy enough to uh, speak of the killings in positive terms, like, they deserved it or this, that, Poles would obviously, and everybody case would obviously have a strong basis for condemning Ukrainians for doing. But nobody, I have never heard of anybody ever suggesting that this was a good idea. or that it's laudable or anything like that. No, Ukraine, everybody acknowledges that it was a tragedy. Again, there were political reasons for it. Ukrainians were sick of having been dominated by others and having been colonized by others, but that doesn't excuse attacking and killing men, women, and children. And again, everybody, and by everybody, I'm talking about public officials, public intellectuals, and so on, acknowledges that. Uh, but the mistakes that a given movement does or makes cannot be used to define that movement, unless that was the only thing or that was the principal thing that the movement did. I mean, for example, I'm an American, so I can speak in terms of or in reference to American history. I mean, somebody could legitimately say that Washington and Jefferson and Madison are founding fathers, ought to have their monuments taken down because they were all racists, and they were slave owners, which of course they were. But that's not the only thing they were. I mean, I think over that last half century or so, we Americans have become used to acknowledging that part of our founding fathers' biographies, as it were. But nobody would suggest that because Jefferson was a slave owner and a racist, that we ought to take down the Jefferson Monument.
Probably the main beneficiary of this current political crisis, and at the moment I would say it is a crisis, is of course Vladimir Putin. Now, whilst I said to you that the EU institutions are very, very much pro-Ukraine, the one exception we might find is the European Parliament, where there are some elements that are, maybe they were close to Viktor Orban, for example, and the Hungarians, the Fidesz people. Orban and Fidesz have had a big footprint in Brussels for the last few years, a lot of money spent on that. That's vanished now pretty much. Um, yeah, so Russia benefits from this, doesn't it? Do you think that this can be resolved very quickly and amicably? This problem basically between the president of Ukraine and the president of Poland. It's really kind of, can we focus it to being between them and not between two countries?
I mean, I have some familiarity with Polish domestic politics. I am nowhere near being an expert on them, so I can only speculate. My sense is that what President Nawrocki has done and has said, and what some of his supporters have done and said, has a lot to do with Polish domestic politics. Insofar as you know, Poland's going to have elections in October of 2027. And I think people have begun positioning themselves. And because unfortunately there has been a historic sort of trend, or strain rather is the better way of putting it, of Ukrainophobia in Poland. I think that he is trying to exploit that because it's something analogous to Donald Trump's attempt to demonize immigrants and Mexicans and so on and so forth. Uh, so, to the extent that these kinds of things are fueled by Polish domestic politics, I don't know where that goes. I don't know Polish domestic politics well enough. Uh, but I hope that it will be possible to explain to Poles that, look, if if European values mean anything, they mean a sense of mutual respect and reciprocity in terms of expectations and so on. Again, if you Poles would reject the notion of somebody being able to having authority or being entitled to come in and tell you that you should celebrate this or you should not celebrate that, or that person or that historical figure, which I presume Poles would say, yes, of course, no one has the authority or the entitlement to do that. You have to understand that the same applies to Ukrainians. Whether they are open to suasion, I have no idea. Again, my sense, my sense of President Zelensky, and again, I don't speak to him or anything like that. My sense is that he was surprised by what has happened. I think because he assumed that each country has a right to acknowledge or memorialize its own historical figures. And again, this wasn't even initiated by him. This was in response to a fairly standard request by the Ukrainian military unit, which was one of many that had requested to be able to adopt a namesake. Uh, I hope that I hope that a recognition of shared mutual interests will come to prevail. Again, whether it will or won't, I have no idea. You are absolutely 100% right that the only person who's benefiting from this is Vladimir Putin and Russia. And I get the sense from various things that Polish officials are saying that there is recognition of that. So whether, hopefully that may serve to tamp down the controversy. I think that President Zelensky is above all a pragmatist. I've never seen him be sort of strongly ideologically committed to some view or another. I mean, other than defending Ukraine's sovereignty. But I mean, that's the job of a president, obviously. Uh, I mean, my guess would be that President Zelensky would be more than pleased to resolve this and go forward. But at the same time, I mean, he can't. Some Polish officials have suggested that Zelensky needs to apologize to Nawrocki or something like that. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, again, if we're operating according to sort of European principles of mutual dignity, mutual respect, reciprocity, etc., again, assuming Poland does not think that anyone has a right to tell it whom it should honor, then clearly the same should apply to Ukraine.
Quite, quite. Well, let us hope that common sense does break out and that this situation is resolved very, very quickly because it's in the interest of everybody involved, not just Poland and Ukraine, but the European Union as a whole.
Very much so. Very much so.
Bogdan, I want to thank you very much for your time and for sharing your thoughts on this with us. It's been a very, very interesting discussion, and thank you.
My pleasure.